evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. In the second hour, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to shift gears a little bit and we will be speaking with Jerome Corsi. Now, me and Jerome, the last time he was on the show, it's not we did not get along, but I did not agree with a lot of what he said. Now, Jerome Corsi received a PhD from Harvard University in political science in 1972 and has written many books and articles, including co-authoring with John O'Neill the #1 New York Times bestseller, Unfit for Command, Swift Boat Veterans Speak Out Against John Kerry. Corsi's most recent book was authored with Michael Evans, Showdown with Nuclear Iran. Dr. Corsi's other recent books include Black Gold Stranglehold, The Myth of Scarcity and the Politics of Oil, which he co-authored with Craig Smith. Okay. Now, of course, Craig Smith is WorldNet Daily columnist Craig Smith. So you can see that we're probably going to agree on one thing, me and Jerome Corsi, but let's talk about the thing we agree on and probably touch on the things we don't agree on. Like, for instance, I'm not too crazy about his thought on Iran and on Islam and Muslims, etc., etc. But we will be talking today on something that you will, I'm sure, feel that it is important for you, even though you did not know about it. On May 9th, 2007, President Bush signed the Homeland Security presidential directive, which basically gave himself dictatorial powers over you. He very much said that in case of an emergency, in case of an event, anywhere, regardless of location, which results in significant loss of life, which they did not define what that significant loss of life was, and they did not classify what the event might be, except they said it could be economic, terrorist act, it could be environment, it could be anything that will result in the insignificant loss of life or damage to property or the livelihood of Americans. Then President Bush can exercise his directive, which basically taking over all three powers: judicial, executive, and legislative. He will be very much King Bush. He will very much be crowned, even though he is probably crowned now and feel like he is crowned. But the thing about this particular directive is it did not really specify exactly how big the event should be before he exercises that. Could something like what happened in Oklahoma City be this particular event that he's waiting for? And why sign a directive like this before something happened? Because, he could sign it any time. Is he thinking that something will happen, or does he know something that the rest of the country does not know? Is something going to happen soon so he can become King Bush? With us tonight is Jerome Corsi, and he will explain this to us, and hopefully we will be able to understand why President Bush feels that he needs to have all three powers in the United States. Welcome to the program, Jerome.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be back with you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Jerome, what happens? Do we have King Bush now?
Well, it's a very good question. These emergency powers were signed in May, and they were put up on the White House website. The two directives, so listeners can look them up. They are National Security Presidential Directive 51, which is NSPD 51, and Homeland Security Presidential Directive, HSPD 20. And these two directives, which President Bush signed, give him the ability to declare a national emergency. And when he does, it's very loosely defined as to what's a national emergency. It could be virtually anything. It could be a health epidemic. It could be another Katrina. It could be terrorism. It could be riots and insurrection. Whatever he declares is a national emergency. And the president can take over all powers. He can direct all executive branches of government, federal, state, local, even territorial and tribal governments, as well as private sector organizations. And there's no definition that he has to go to Congress or when these powers would end. It basically allows Bush to declare himself to be a dictator in the event that he says there's an emergency. And I've never seen powers like this being able to be declared under the U.S. Constitution. It's exceptional. I think it's completely unconstitutional.
Okay. Two questions for you. Where is our Congress and where is our media?
Well, Congress is clearly asleep at the switch. We have a National Emergency Act, which requires U.S. Code Title 50, and it requires the president to, declare immediately to Congress that an emergency exists, and that Congress has like 60 days to change the declaration. That's not even specifically referenced in these emergency presidential directives. I think Congress should be up in arms. They should be demanding hearings. They should say the president's grabbing power. We're an equal branch of government. We demand to be involved. It's completely irresponsible to me that Congress is not raising a fuss about this and demanding that these presidential directives be defined by the National Emergency Act or some other bill that Congress would pass.
Okay. What about the media?
Another good question. I mean, the media seems again asleep. The media didn't pick this up. The media seems to say, oh, well, whatever the president is doing is fine. It's got to be for our good. Well, for people who think that President Bush is just fine, he can have these emergency powers, I'd like to remind them that whatever powers President Bush puts into effect will be available to President Bush's successor. And many people who like President Bush don't like the prospect of Hillary Clinton as the next president. Well, she'd get these powers. And the point I make is really we ought to look at these powers not with regards to who the president is, but history, which teaches us that the president's grab for powers like this is always a bad idea. It's how dictators are created. It's how in ancient Rome, the councils said there's an emergency, we're now going to grab powers to protect the Roman Republic, and we're dictators. Well, they very rarely gave those powers up. And some of the dictators even told the Roman Senate they could go home, they'd protect them better there. Well, that was the end of Roman liberty. And it could be the end of our liberty, too, if President Bush engineers an emergency.
Dr. Corsi, now, if something happens between now and the election, and George Bush has power over all three powers, he very much can delay the election, can't he?
There's nothing in this directive that would prevent it. As I read it, the president could say we're in such a desperate situation with this emergency, whatever it is, the election is postponed or canceled.
Okay. Are we, because I did a couple of shows already on this where, when it first came out, I basically spoke about it, and I know you wrote about it and a few others wrote about it. Are we reading this wrong? Are we like reading something that is not there?
No, it's there. There's no limit to the power the president could exert. Especially after the John Warner Appropriations Act of 2007, which repealed the Posse Comitatus Act, the president can use the military, he can federalize the National Guard, he can basically declare martial law in the case of an emergency and cancel elections. It could be done.
So all we're waiting for is probably something blowing a bomb somewhere in the basement of some federal court, and he can declare martial law. Well,
that's right. The problem is, and you hit upon it, that there are many instances, even in American history, where emergencies have been manufactured, created. The Tonkin Gulf incident, good example, where now we know that this Tonkin Bay incident never really happened. But yet President Johnson used the scare to get legislation which permitted him to declare a presidential war on Vietnam. And if it could happen then, it could happen again.
Well, also,
could happen.
What just came out with what the CIA and even the military was planning to do in the case of Cuba, where even attacks on American people they were considering that to be the reason and I guess for invading Cuba. Did you read about that lately?
Oh yes, CIA memos have surfaced which had plans to have the CIA cause the crisis, including killing Americans, doing damage in the United States that would lead to a war against Cuba to overthrow Castro. Those memos now have come out. They've been validated in 2 or 3 major books. A couple of major books just recently written. I just finished reading one called, The Brothers, which was about the hidden history of John and Bobby Kennedy. Yes, that memo exists, and the CIA did contemplate creating an emergency, attacking us, by the CIA attacking the United States, so the United States would blame it on Cuba and attack Cuba. Now, the CIA can contemplate that. It's very frightening to see the president grab these kind of powers.
Well, Jerome,
our Constitution prohibited it. Our Constitution knew these kinds of things could happen. Our founding fathers were well aware of ancient Roman history, and the founding fathers did not grant emergency powers to the president. President Bush has granted them to himself.
Right. Well, what's so scary about the Cuban deal is, you see, the CIA, we know the CIA does a lot of covert operations, but having the chief of staffs and the joint chief of staffs actually approving those plans, that's what's so scary about it.
Well, that whole plan got very far, and it got up to the point where, President Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy would not allow it to go forward. But, the fact that it occurred and the fact that it surfaced in the Kennedy administration and has now been validated, it's very frightening. And again, it teaches the same lesson that ancient history teaches. Our founding fathers knew not to allow the presidents to declare themselves emergency powers. The Roman Council had done it. And the Roman Council went for a power grab, just like Bush is going for a power grab. I mean, it's one of those unfortunate things. I mean, it's been said many, many times. Lord Acton saying that absolute power, corrupts absolutely. I mean, we have a balanced constitutional republic where the Congress is supposed to assert its authority, and we're in a constitutional crisis right now because Congress has not asserted its authority over these emergency power presidential directives. They're just allowing them to go forward as if nothing has happened.
Now, let's say if that happens and he does declare himself to be the power holder of all powers of the United States, do you think, the Joint Chief of Staffs, has it happened historically where they actually did not go with what the president wishes?
Well, there's many instances where the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the CIA have violated the president's orders, and it could happen again. One of the cases in the Kennedy administration, to go back there, was the assassination of DM, who was, the head of Vietnam. And just before Jack Kennedy's own assassination, DM was assassinated with the complicity of our CIA and military against Jack Kennedy's orders. These things happen, and it's one of the reasons having our CIA involved in this covert operations worldwide is a very bad idea. It's especially a bad idea right now when we've got an armada sitting off the shore of Iran, and we're doing everything we can to taunt Iran or to create the conditions for a war. I'm extremely disturbed to hear today that Nicholas Burns, one of the Assistant Secretaries of State, is making these statements that Iran is supplying with arms the Taliban. Well, the truth is we've known that the Taliban is being supplied by arms by Iran going back maybe 10 years. why all of a sudden is this being brought forward by the State Department? I mean, it made me very suspicious today, and thinking the Bush administration is trying to bring out old stuff, make it packaged as new information, as a pretext for going to war against Iran, which I think would be a disaster. If we do go to war against Iran, it could be a regional war very quickly in the Middle East, which again I think would be a disaster, and it could cause violence in the United States, and we could have martial law. I mean, that sequence of events is a scenario I worry about and fear.
Are we ready? I mean, even if we want to, can we take on another war at this time?
It would be a horrible idea. The idea of going to war with Iran is an extremely bad idea. For 2 years, I have fought against it. I walked, after I wrote Atomic Iran, I walked with the Iranian expatriates 200 miles from Liberty Bell to Washington, D.C. It took over a month. We were arguing for there to be freedom in Iran, but not a war, to let Iran peacefully change from within, and to support the expatriates around the world, the Iranian expatriates and the freedom fighters within Iran that want to change their own country, and not to do it through covert action or war. I think that's where the Bush administration makes a mistake. And the Bush administration evidently has covert action going on again within Iran, which is a disaster, and has, these war threats going on with an armada off the shore of Iran. And I can't tell people enough that a war with Iran will only cause a regional conflict in the Middle East. It will not solve a problem. It may not take down the Ahmadinejad regime. It may make it stronger. And we will deepen a problem. War in the Middle East is the problem. It's never the solution.
Now, speaking of countries arming some, groups, we are arming the Sunni groups in Iraq. Those the same people that we called terrorists, and the same people that they were attacking us. Now we are arming them.
Well, the idea that we can intervene and fight faction against faction, and the Sunnis and the Shiites in Iraq have been fighting each other for a long time. The Sunni were in power with Saddam. Now that Saddam is gone, the Shiites in southern Iraq are more dominant. Iraq probably ought to be 3 countries. It probably ought to be the Shiites in the south, the Sunnis in the center of the country, and the Kurds, the ethnic minority, in the north. But we don't have the ability or the wisdom to sort these problems out. They're not our problem. If we continue to occupy Iraq, we are an occupying army, and we are part of the problem. George Bush campaigned on no nation building in 2000. We created a quick strike military that accomplished its goal when it took down Saddam Hussein. Why we're still there and planning to be there for an indefinite period of time, I think, is a very bad idea, and it's going to only end up in an expanded war that we will ultimately only make worse by our presence.
Now, Jerome, dividing the country between these 3 groups, and actually it could be 4 groups because the Shiites are almost divided in half, for pro-Iranians and pro-Arabs, so that there could be a problem too. But back in 1982, there was a Mossad document that was translated by Israel Shahak. Basically, it talks about taking Saddam out and dividing the country amongst those 3 lines that you suggested. And if we do that now, then obviously to the whole world, we very much had done the Israeli jobs for them, which most people in the world think that that's what we went there to do. So
I don't think we should do it at all. I don't think we should even recommend it. I don't think we could, the idea we came over to Iraq and said we're going to put democracy here.
Why did we go to Iraq? Why?
Probably for the oil.
But 15% of our oil was coming from Iraq anyhow.
And probably because George Bush was still mad that Saddam Hussein wanted to kill his father. I mean, I don't think there's, the original reasons that were given, which at the time I believed, were the weapons of mass destruction, and it turned out not to be true. I think that George Bush went into that war on a pretext now, and that's been very well demonstrated. And that's undermined his credibility, and it continues to. But the point is, I'm saying that for us to make a decision as to what should be the future of Iraq is a very bad idea. That's up to the people of Iraq. I think that's got to be worked out internally. And I don't think we can do it. We've tried many times. The British tried. We don't have the understanding. We are not Sunnis. We're not Shiites. I don't think we can determine for another people what's best for them. It's not our problem. I think it's a problem that the Iraqis, the Shiites and Sunnis have to resolve for themselves.
So, okay, which brings us back. If the Americans don't have a reason of why they went to Iraq, then they went there for the Israeli reason.
Well, Israel, I support Israel. I've always supported Israel. I supported Israel even as a kid, just for biblical reasons. I'm a Christian and I read in the Bible. Those who support Israel, God supports. I look at the 1948 partition. Israel is established as a sovereign nation. The Sunnis in Saudi Arabia, I think in Egypt and in Jordan, have accepted Israel. I think if we could create a Palestinian state, a legitimate Palestinian state, which we need to do, we could go forward and allow Israel to continue to exist. I don't see that the solution is getting rid of Israel. I think over the next 50 to 100 year period of time, the state of Israel is going to be very different than it is today anyway. Israel has a much stronger Muslim population than it ever did in the last 50 years. That's going to continue. And I think a natural evolution of Israel with the Israeli state remaining in place is a valuable and good objective of U.S. foreign policy. I also don't think we should go to war to support Israel unless it were a war declared by Congress. I'm opposed to all of these presidentially undeclared wars since Korea that we've entered. Korea, Vietnam, Kosovo, and now, Iraq were all presidential wars that were undeclared. I think they're wrong.
So you said you support Israel just for biblical reasons, no other reasons?
To me, it's that fundamental. I mean, since I was a child, I've supported Israel.
Okay. Now, did God in the Bible say support Israel?
The Bible says those who support Israel, God will support.
What Israel God was talking about?
And look, I support Israel, period.
I understand that. I understand that. And, before you came on the program, I know exactly, and I read a lot of your writings.
Right.
But I'm just curious because you support Israel for biblical reasons.
I'm not a profound biblical scholar. But
okay.
A lot of people are much more profound than I am. It, to me, was a intuition. I've read it in the Bible.
I know, but Jerome, you're a smart guy. You're a PhD, and right. If God said in the Bible to support Israel, I was just wondering which Israel was God talking about? The one that was created in 1948?
Look, that's good enough for me. I'll take that one.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. It's not really convincing, but that's not. I'll leave that for another show that me and you will get into it on the.
That's how it's not going to be all that convincing to people who get into the argument back and forth. I think every nation state going back, including the United States. There's legitimate arguments. We stole the land from the Indians, the Native American Indians. Well, who do the Native American Indians steal it from? When we get back into these ancient issues of where countries were established, etc., I think everybody's right and everybody's wrong. So I kind of come to a point on those questions, and I just say, okay, the United States is a legitimate country, and it deserves to be here and be a nation state and to be sovereign and to be protected. I don't go for creating Aztlan, an ancient mythical, Aztec empire that includes most of the Southwest. We talk about the Aztecs and the Mayas. Well, the Spanish people don't in Mexico today, through Central America, don't speak Aztec and Mayan. They speak Spanish. Well, the Spanish is not a Spanish people. The Spanish were the conquistadors. I don't think we get anywhere in these ancient countries that going back hundreds or thousands of years and trying to sort it out. Because as soon as we do, everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
Okay. Um, now, you wrote, Islam is like a virus. It affects the mind. Maybe even better as an analogy, it is a cancer that destroys the body it infects. No doctor would hesitate to eliminate cancer cells from the body. Have you read...
I wrote that in Free Republic. I've long ago apologized for it. Everything I wrote in Free Republic was written not as an expression of my true beliefs. It was written to be provocative.
Okay.
And I disavowed the statement because it was written to be provocative. It was written intentionally to be, say the worst thing you can say, and this was it. I think Islam is a legitimate religion. I walked 200 miles with the Muslims who are Iranian, wanting freedom in their own country. Those were peaceful people. They believed in Islam, they believed in Allah, and they were dedicated to peace. So I disagree even with those on the right who say that Islam is a violent religion or the principles of the Quran are violent. I have experienced in my own life Islamic people who are peace-loving and want freedom. And with 1 billion people believing in Islam around the world, the vast majority are such. So statements like you just quoted that I wrote to be provocative, I've apologized for. They don't write provocative statements like that anymore. It was a long time ago, and they don't reflect what I truly ever believe.
Okay, good. That saved us a lot of time of pursuing that statement any further.
Islam is a legitimate religion. Islam, Christianity had violent times. Christianity went through reforms. Christianity doesn't go through inquisitions anymore. It doesn't go through crusades. I think Islam around the world is. I've always written that the terrorists have hijacked Islam. I've written that Ahmadinejad and his regime with the mullahs have hijacked Iran.
Would you say just like John Hagee has hijacked Christianity?
Well, John Hagee is an extremist too. I've not supported John Hagee. John Hagee is out there. The people who essentially are writing books on Iran and calling for war differ from me. I'm writing books on Iran. I'm saying I think war is going to be the outcome because I don't think President Bush will be creative enough to have other policies. But I've said over and over again, the war with Iran is a very bad idea, and it'll be the worst possible thing that can happen. I've been totally against war with Iran, even though I predicted it's going to happen. When it happens, we're going to have a regional war. That regional war could expand very quickly. There'll be, Rabin, Prime Minister Rabin, at the end of his life, I came to where I am. He was one of the greatest warriors Israel had. At the end of his life, he came to the conclusion that for every person in the Middle East that dies in anger, fighting these issues, there's another generation of hatred and another generation of war set in place. We're not going to solve the problems of the Middle East by more war. I think the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Saudis with regards to Israel are very different today than they were when I was a kid and Nasser was alive and the Soviet Union was fueling Nasser. Nasser then and the Sunnis were leading the wars against Israel. That's over with. Now it's the Shiites and Ahmadinejad that are leading the wars against Israel, and they also lead the wars against the Sunnis. I mean, right after Ahmadinejad got rid of Israel and the United States, the next group he's coming after are the Sunnis in Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
And I think that this is a transfer of the hatred of Israel to a new group, and I think if over time Ahmadinejad can be rejected, the Shiites too will come to an accommodation with
Now, do you really believe the rhetoric of Ahmadinejad of getting rid of Israel, that Israel has 200 nuclear bombs and he does not even have one? How is he going to get rid of the United States?
Well, Ahmadinejad believes, you go back to Khomeini. Khomeini made a set of predictions at the end, through his life, at the end of his life especially. He predicted the Soviet Union would fall. It did. He predicted that Saddam Hussein would fall. Well, we've now accomplished that for Khomeini. Khomeini predicted that Israel and the United States would fall, and Ahmadinejad has said that he wants to bring those predictions to truth. I do think they believe in the Mahdi, the 12th Imam that went down the well, that's going to come back out of the well. The idea from the Shiites that the family of the Prophet is going to prevail, and the 12th Imam, after the martyrs of Ali and Hussein, which go back to the Prophet's time, because Ali was married to Fatima,
the Prophet's daughter.
His daughter, the daughter of the Prophet.
Right.
And so, this goes back, this fight has been being fought since the time of Muhammad.
Right. But has
that they do believe.
When has Iran historically been a threat to Israel? I mean, even during the Khomeini regime, the Khomeini regime was in secret arms buy-in with the Israelis.
Well, I think that there is a deep belief, almost a mystical belief, that Ahmadinejad shares, and he shares it with various ayatollahs, like Ayatollah Yazdi. They do truly believe mystically, almost prophetically.
Yeah, but I think the Israel thing is more for domestic consumption than anything else.
Well, there's no doubt that it serves a domestic goal, and it mobilizes the people within Iran.
Right.
And it is a social control speech as well as aimed at Israel. But, I do think that there's a belief there that the Shiites have that, you could also say, why would the Shiites believe they could ever overcome the Sunnis? In Islam, worldwide, the Shiites are a very small minority.
Correct.
They're only a majority in
Iran.
In Iran, and then in certain parts of Iraq. But yet they do have this fanatical belief that the family of the Prophet is going to return. And I think the belief in the return of the Mahdi is a messianic view, and they truly believe it.
Right.
Whether it's rational or not is another question, but they do believe it.
Okay. Jerome, stay with me. We're going to the phones with Freedom. Good, Freedom?
Yes. May I ask a question of your guest?
Sure, go ahead.
Jerome, I heard you on Coast to Coast, and then I was fortunate enough to see you on C-SPAN, and I was extremely impressed with you on C-SPAN with Brian Lamb. Look, the whole thing is this.
I appreciate it.
Joe Lieberman on Face of the Nation Sunday called for a preemptive attack on Iran. Joe Lieberman, the senator from Connecticut. And it seems that Joe Lieberman is carrying water either for Benjamin Netanyahu or someone. But if, in fact, we take Joe Lieberman's advice, President Bush take Joe Lieberman's advice, and preemptively strike Iran with our task forces that are now, our carrier task forces that are now in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, will this predicate George Bush enacting his national security powers through NSPD 15 and through Homeland Security? And what has Michael Chertoff have to do with this whole thing? And thanks very much.
Well, I was deeply disappointed to hear Senator Lieberman call for a preemptive strike against Iran and start talking about the time to start bombing Iran. That's irresponsible. It's a bad idea. I don't think we have justification for a preemptive war. I don't see anywhere in the Constitution that allows us to fight preemptive wars. And it certainly demands that Congress declare a war before we'd ever go to war with Iran. And I see no basis for it at the present right now at all. Iran has not attacked us. In fact, we've got this armada out there. It's like we're sticking the stick in the face of the bear. And I think we should stop it. I was also I am extremely concerned that the scenario that your caller described, that an attack on Iran could preempt an emergency in the United States and could lead to martial law. It could happen.
Because remember, it said any location.
Any location. And why President Bush now, 6 years into his term, suddenly feels it's necessary to issue these new emergency declarations, I don't know. But it scares me to have it declared at the same time we've got this armada facing Iran. And I also am fearful that President Bush is thinking that his legacy will, be tarnished because of the failure to succeed in this extended occupation of Iraq. And the solution President Bush is contemplating is not what the Iraq study group and James Baker recommended, which is to to phase a withdrawal and negotiate with Iran, but instead is to expand the war in the Middle East. We've got gunboats and destroyers attacking Somalia when they say we're going after Al-Qaeda camps. Well, this is an expanded war, and the Middle East could become a regional war. That's not going to be to anybody's benefit. And Joe Lieberman is irresponsible to be out there saying that we need to attack Iran when he says it on national television, himself, being a Jew with credibility among the Jewish community. I just think it's outside the box, and it shouldn't be done.
Now, are we dealing... Apparently, we don't have a policy in the Middle East, so are we just playing with it like trial and error? And are we trying to export the violence from Iraq to other countries in the neighborhood, such as Lebanon, for instance? You do know what's going on now in Lebanon with this new organization that was created like last September with the help of Prince Bandar of Saudi Arabia. And actually, as Seymour Hersh had reported, that actually the government of Lebanon was involved in financing this particular group that they are now trying to kill. What is going on there? Are we trying to spread violence throughout, or what are we trying to do there?
Well, violence is spreading through the Middle East. You've also got Hamas attacking Fatah within the Gaza. Part of the issue, too, is that, Iran, facing its own internal problems with the sanctions and its failing economy, does not have the money to supply Hezbollah and Hamas that it did have even a few months ago. And so you've got a crisis going on within the Islamic organizations.
What's the connection there between them? What are the links between them, though? Who's fueling them?
Well, we're fueling the whole thing by pressuring Iran and pressuring the situation within the Middle East. Do we have a policy? I'm not sure that Condoleezza Rice or George Bush really do have a policy. Not apparent to me. Not when we have an armada off the shore of Iran. I've argued that we should, work to change Iran peacefully from within. This Ahmadinejad regime is horribly unpopular, and now Ahmadinejad is going through a crackdown again of dissidents within Iran. They're rounding people up. They just went through Tehran and rounded up a whole series of people for violations of dress code, and they've rounded up a whole series of students. There's more. There's 4 Americans captive right now and hostage in Iran, which we're hearing very little about in the American press. Ahmadinejad is an oppressive, extreme regime that has hijacked Islam and it's hijacked Iran. And if we could use, we got apartheid to fall in South Africa without a war. We should be equally subtle to be able to apply pressure to Iran and be able to pressure them into having a peaceful change of regime. Saudi Arabia is always a potential problem in the region. They still have Wahhabism. They're still fighting for the Sunnis within Iraq. They're still destabilizing and worrying about and causing internal problems in Lebanon. Lebanon is a total mess. Lebanon now has got the army going against the Al-Qaeda strongholds. Well, that's also an indirect way to attack Hezbollah. Hezbollah is close to being a controlling position within the Lebanese government. Syria is still involved in Lebanon, still involved in Hariri's assassination, and still has they may have withdrawn the Syrian army, but they left the intelligence force. There's so many forces within the Middle East right now that are disruptive. For us to be in the middle of it with an occupying army in Iraq is just a very bad idea. I think we should get out of there, stage a withdrawal, say that we've accomplished more than what we set to accomplish, hand it over to the Iraqi people, and let the Iraqi people sort out their own future and their own fate, without us being involved even from the CIA. We should pull the CIA out, stop covert action, and truly get out of the region and let the region self-determine.
Okay. Dr. Corsi, stay with me. We're going back to the phones with Bonnie. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Yes. Dr. Corsi and Dr. Tillawi, I've been listening and I respect his intelligence, But earlier when he spoke as being a Christian, I too am a Christian. And I too read the Bible, and I do not agree with the hypothesis that we must support Israel at all costs biblically. And because in the Bible it states clearly that God punished bad members of the tribe of Israel when they did warring that was wrong and everything else. So, you have to be very selective there. And the other thing I wanted to mention was if you look at the Israeli approach to the Middle East, and our approach, I think that Israel supplied Iran in that war, and we supplied Saddam, and they went to battle. And now here we were, supposedly two allies supplying opposite sides. Then if you look now, the same thing is being promoted, like let's get Iraq divided up. And it appears to me that some of this, in some of the books I've read, represent divide and conquer by Israel to eliminate the power structures in the Middle East where they are the biggest, strongest boy on the block. And I just don't agree with some of the things you're saying, but in some things I do. I wish you would pick up a couple of books that I think are really relevant. One was The Holocaust Industry. The other one is, there was one called Nemesis, and by Johnson, and there are just several, Are We Rome by Colin Murphy, several good books that deal with some of these things. And Civilization on Trial, an old Arnold Toynbee Orwellian book, How the Few Will Rule. And some of these things, are easy to just, all of us to have an opinion on. But I just think, as well educated as you are, that you would have known some of these things about Israel. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Bonnie.
There's just a couple bedrock beliefs I've got that are just very deep in my psyche or belief system. One is, I believe in the United States of America. I believe in the constitutional principles on which we were founded. I'm sure they could be criticized too. And I support the State of Israel as was created in 1948, and I continue to. And I feel a biblical issue there, and I probably feel a religious issue on the creation of the United States. Our rights were declared to be inalienable. I think that the principles of government that we have, which define our freedoms, the institutions, were formed and struggled over for thousands of years, and probably do form a basis of natural right in terms of how human beings function in political settings and entities. So those are a couple of bedrock beliefs I've got. I know they can be criticized. I know others disagree, but that's basically just who I am.
Okay. Jerome, the Arabs have extended the hand of peace to Israel. They did it more than one time, and the last time they did it, it was collectively by all the Arab countries. When do you think Israel will be ready for peace?
Well, I think that Israel is increasingly ready for peace. I think Israel has given back land already.
When?
Well, the Gaza Strip was given back.
Well, they didn't really want Gaza. I mean, you remember Ishaq Rabin when he said he would, he hoped that one day he will wake up and Gaza will be lost in the sea. So they really never wanted that peace.
Gaza has been given back. There's discussion of giving the West Bank back. There's discussion of the Golan Heights. I think all these things can be looked at and considered.
But how would the people who believe in the Bible, though, take that? Because, I mean, biblically, you're given biblical land.
Well, I'm not so firm in this that I'm drawing lines and saying this land has to be kept and this land doesn't have to be kept. I'm not that rigid. I also think that what would advance the cause now of the Middle East is for Ahmadinejad to stop this rhetoric about wiping Israel off the map, regardless why he's doing it, whether it's for internal reasons or because he really believes it. He ought to stop it. It would diffuse the situation and reduce a visible source of threat against the nation state. I think then we can get back on with the plan that needs to be advanced, which is the establishment of a Palestinian state. But it can't happen while Israel is under continuous threats from a state like Iran, which, every time it has an opportunity.
But Jerome, Hamas has only been on the scene for a few years, and the Palestinian had given Israel an agreement, a peace agreement, with the signing of the Oslo agreement, but nothing happened, though, and the Palestinians were not hitting Israel, and they were not, for 7 years, everything was going fine, but Israel yet it continued to build settlements inside the West Bank. It continued with its assassination and targeted assassination. It continued with everything. So Hamas is not really the problem here. Maybe it's the problem now, but Hamas wasn't the problem a few years back. Why didn't Israel?
Well, you're going to constantly get into a right and wrong in the Middle East. That's one of the problems in the Middle East. Everybody's right and everybody's wrong. It's very easy to have that be the case. What's got to happen is, I think, right now, if Iran would step down from the rhetoric, and Iran is funding Hamas now, just like Iran is funding Hezbollah, if all of these groups dedicated to the destruction of Israel would, just like Nasser being gone, there was a fundamental change when Egypt stood down from a determination to eliminate Israel from the Middle East.
Now, Jerome, I want to tell you, like what that lady just told you, that you are a very smart guy. How could you even believe that there is a force in the Middle East that is capable of destroying Israel?
Well, it could happen.
With who?
Who? No state in the world is invulnerable from a scenario that would wipe it out.
Okay, who's going to wipe it out? With what? With what? Israel has 200 nuclear bombs. It's got the whole United States Army or military behind it if anyone attacks it. So who dares to attack Israel?
If Israel, to save itself, has to cause a nuclear war in the Middle East, that's not going to save Israel. That's going to be a nuclear war that's going to have broad and far-reaching consequences that are detrimental to everybody. There are scenarios that no state is going to be secure when its neighbors are threatening it. That rhetoric has got to stop. That rhetoric stops, we can get back onto, I think, a path of creating a Palestinian state. And there is a fundamental change today from where countries like Egypt were in the 1950s and where they are today. It's fundamental. I remember as a child seeing Nasser and Egypt continuously make statements very much like Ahmadinejad is making today. And wars occurring as a consequence. I think the Shiites will not continue this indefinitely, any more than the Sunnis continued it indefinitely in Egypt. And I think a Palestinian state will occur. But I don't think we're going to create it, or the United States' presence there is contributing to peace.
Now, we did have an Iranian president who was more pro-Western, but we did not try to work with him. How come we did not do anything with the Iranian nuclear program when I forgot his name, the other president before?
Well, Bill Clinton tried to work. They tried to work with both Khatami and with Rafsanjani. Bill Clinton did try to work with them. In fact, Madeleine Albright apologized for the CIA's involvement in Mossadegh, who was replaced, was overthrown as prime minister in 1953. And, that didn't solve the problem. The problem with the Ahmadinejad regime and with the mullahs is that they are a very, very radical, almost mystical sect that believe in the revolution of Khomeini. And when Khomeini's revolution, inspires belief in the Mahdi returning and the triumph of Shiite Islam and the, these radical ideas that not only would the Soviet Union fall and Saddam Hussein would fall, but so would Israel and so would the United States. This fuels a radicalism among the Shiite minority that controls Iran that doesn't reflect the Persian people and doesn't reflect the Middle East. The Persians, for centuries, have lived with and coexisted with Jews. I mean, go back into the Bible. It's you can see Cyrus the Great was the one who freed the Jews from Babylonian captivity and gave them the wherewithal to build a second temple. Jews have lived among the Persian people for centuries peacefully. But yet Ahmadinejad and this radical group of mullahs that control Iran go after the Jews within Iran in a way that is not typical of the Persian people themselves.
Okay. Well, Jerome, we only have a couple of minutes left, and the main subject we wanted to talk about was that presidential directive. But it looks like, I mean, the scenario, if anything happens, it does not look...
I'm very concerned. I think President Bush is preparing for a war, an expanded war in the Middle East that will include Iran. I think the signals we're getting out in the last few days, Senator Lieberman saying that on national TV that we should have a preemptive strike against Iran. Undersecretary of State Burns today saying that Iran is supplying the Taliban as if it were new information. These are provocative statements that lead the United States in the wrong direction, which is direction towards war. And the fact we have these emergency powers in place, recently declared, that we're militarizing to use the U.S. military in domestic situations, all these things concern me greatly. The President is pursuing a track of a greater militarization as the solution. President Bush is deeply wrong, because that will only be detrimental to peace in the Middle East. It'll be detrimental to peace in the United States. And it'll be detrimental to our freedoms here under the Constitution. None of these things are constitutional. Constitutionally, we should never go to war in the Middle East unless Congress declares it, including in Iraq. Unconstitutional, presidentially declared war. And constitutionally, the military should not be involved in domestic activity and action. The police in the states should have primary authority there, not the federal government, not the U.S. military. These developments frighten me, and I do not think that they're in the long-term interest of the United States or peace in the Middle East.
Very good, Jerome. Just have time to say thank you, sir, for coming on the program. And hopefully we will not be calling him King George anytime soon.
I don't want to call him King George. I'd like to be calling him soon former President Bush.
Very good.
I voted for him twice, and I'm deeply disappointed. And I want to be calling him former President Bush just as soon as possible.
Well, both of them. Take Cheney with him, too.
Former Vice President Cheney sounds...
Exactly. Thank you, sir, for coming on.
An honor to be with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was Jerome Corsi speaking about the presidential directive, among other things. I understand some people out there, and I don't understand why he's pro-Israel. I mean, he has so many good ideas, and I've received a lot of emails from you, the viewers, when you found out that I was going to have Jerome on the program, and I appreciate all the emails that you sent out. Some people thought I was crazy for having him on, but you know, if he can't shake off that Israel thing, I think he will be a pretty good guy. And but hey, that's his opinion. That's why we are here in the United States. Everyone gets to have his opinion, but deep down inside, I think probably having that particular position is probably good for his professional life. And but hey, if his conviction tells him to do that, then I can't argue with that. We'll see you, ladies and gentlemen, next week, next Tuesday at 6:30 Central. Good night.